Aloha, I'm Felicia Miller Johnson, and I conduct work life video interviews with career professionals that become an all intuitive conversation. Aloha, welcome to another episode of All Intuitive Conversation. I'm Felicia Miller Johnson, and I have the pleasure of connecting with Garland today. And this is going to be interesting because Garland is also a shaman. So it's a very spiritual aspect of that. So let's bring him to the screen. Aloha.
Hello.
How are you today?
Yeah,
Uh-oh, we had a little hiccup there. You still there?
I'm still here.
Okay. All right. All right. There we go. You're on. There we go. Aloha, Diana. Welcome to the show. She is watching, so let me just show that we have a live guest here. Aloha.
Yeah.
So, Garland,
Yes.
this is what was unusual is when I was already, well, I shouldn't say unusual. I'm going to say refreshingly different.
Okay.
Um, like I said, a lot of the guests I connect with here are on LinkedIn.
hmm
And on your LinkedIn profile, you identify as a shaman. You have it here in your title.
hmm
So you're public about that. What is a shaman?
Um, for me, a shaman is someone who understands the cogs that turn to make life happen, and to some extent, we understand where those cogs came from.
Mm,
So it's not necessary for us to make our own cogs, but it is
mhm.
necessary for us to understand um, what those cogs are, why they turn, and to sort of function on that premise. So it takes a significant portion of the guesswork out of trying to design your life.
Designing your life. Okay, so cogs. Got that part. Let's go even further.
hmm
How did you become a shaman? When did you decide in your life? Because was it 5? Was it 7? Was it a teenager? Like, when did you go on this journey and says that I'm a shaman?
Well, I grew up Christian, so
Mm,
it was it was a huge transition.
tell me more. Hmm.
um, quite a few years ago, I had a really bad situation happen with family that it almost turned fatal, and
Mm,
that situation left me with uh, a lot of PTSD that ran heavily for about 3 months. I was waking up with cold sweats every night. I remember thinking, I need to deal with this, or else I'm not going to live to see 25.
right.
And in that process, I remember distinctly hearing a voice tell me one night, face your fears. And it really bugged me because I didn't really know what I was afraid of, because I wasn't generally afraid of stuff.
Hmm.
And when I got to thinking about it, I realized that as a Christian, the devil came up. But then I thought, well, I'm not really afraid of the devil, so what am I afraid of? And then I remembered in the Bible talked about magic, and that kind of scared crap out of me. So I figured the only way for me to truly face my deepest fear was to answer the question: is magic real or is it not? And I had made a solidarity point in my mind that whether or not I found out it was real, at least I would know, and then I would have faced my fear, regardless of what the outcome was going to be. If I was going to go to hell, so be it. Whatever. I found out for real. If I found out that it's not real, so be it. I found out it's not real. That's kind of what I went into it with.
And so you're saying the word magic?
Oh yeah,
Okay. Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
so, um, And this was back in my country where I grew up in Trinidad. So I went down to the local bookstore downtown, and I found, lo and behold, a book on magic. It's called Magic for Beginners
Mm.
by J.H. Brennan. And the reason I picked that book up is because it said that it would teach me how to materialize $100 bill.
Hmm.
So,
Okay.
so
So
I
the
thought,
financial aspect of it. Yeah.
right. So it was on, and I did. And the book was divided into two parts. So the first half was, you know, the author basically said, if you choose to stop here, that's great. You have some skills now. Go live your life. But
Mm-hmm.
he said if you go past this point, you can't unsee it.
Mm.
I was already invested, so I said, well, let's go.
Right, because I didn't got this $100.
Exactly, right?
What else?
And it was interesting to me because the first three chapters of that book allowed me to immediately stop my PTSD.
Mm.
The meditations that he had in there that I followed through with, they stopped. There was no more cold sweats. My mind settled. And
Mm.
so for me, at that point, I was kind of thinking, well, if this is really the devil's work, well, he could make it work just to keep me enticed. So I
Uh-huh.
had, I had to go through with the whole thing to kind of find that out.
Yes.
So fast forward, a few years later, um, I eventually discovered that my family's history came from pre-slavery as a shamanistic um, village, which is in the area that's now called Benin.
Mm.
So there was a cousin of mine who actually did some research, and she found out who one of those slaves were, found out his name, and traced it all the way back to Western side. So I mean, in your family, you hear people talk stories, right? But you don't really
Right.
take them seriously when you're younger. And this is the thing that happened for me. When this event happened in my life, it
Mm-hmm.
set me on that path to actually find out more. So when I immigrated to Canada, it was one of the things that I wanted to do, but I had no intention to make this like a business, which it is now. Like it's not like I never intended that. This was just something that I wanted to do for me, for my person, because my backbone was in music. I spent a
Mm.
lot of years with music, so that was where I was headed. I had no intention to do like it just that slipped out from under me like hardcore.
Mm.
It didn't just get like slipped away. It was yanked hard out from under my feet. So I didn't have a choice but um, to really take this on.
Yep.
And when I was trying to figure out how do I define what I was doing,
Mm-hmm.
that's when I found the word shaman, because this is what our people were in the early days of Benin pre-slavery.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like while you've been talking and sharing this amazing story, you've been
Hmm.
tapping into that energy, which you're well aware of.
Hmm.
It's so interesting. Of course, when I saw that you were a shaman, I wanted to pull out this whole shaman deck, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so the very first one that came out was standing people. And what it says on the back of this card, it says in Native American language, there are no objects, only relatives. Thus, trees are the standing people. So think about this, the key word that stood out were relatives,
Hmm.
right? Because when you first were talking about your story and just, the people and your family and the tragic situation that you had that was connected to your relatives.
Hmm.
Then you went out, it's like, you know what? Let me go out, as they say, kind of like in the woods.
Hmm.
You had a whole woodshed kind of moment of let me reflect. This is not serving me. And the people that were your relatives, right, became these trees. Like you had these new pillars. Like, what is it that I need to know?
Yeah.
And so in essence, like the next one is a man that's sitting on the crown, which is the king of the wands. But
Mm-hmm.
what it says at the bottom, it says motivational, inspiring, theatrical, ambitious. Take a leadership role, step into the spotlight. Public speaking, keep your eyes on the big picture, communicate your vision, don't be sensitive to criticism. What stood out was that now you're still sitting, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you're no longer sitting out here in
Nope.
these woods, right? You're sitting out here in this public face of
Mm-hmm.
saying that, yes, I am embracing my magic, the whole shamanism. I am in control of this situation.
Yeah.
And if nothing else, even much more like just respect it, because this is now showing that I am taking on like my kingdom, my priesthood, like all that comes with that, the whole generations of kings, which you went back what I heard when you were saying your whole story,
Yeah.
which ultimately led you to the next card that came out that talks about the theme of empowered.
Oh
You
wow.
started off with the I don't want to be here, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now like you're here,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't loss of me that the whole green thing is coming in, because you usually trees are
Yeah.
green. You
Yeah.
got the green curtains, like you're still here, like you got focused on what it is you want to do. Because then it says, I'm exactly where I need to be. You're ready to allow the energy from the divine and the Mother Earth, which you had gotten back here in this
Yeah.
whole tree
Yeah.
thing, right? To fuel you as you fulfill your potential here. So it kind of just went to this whole, now I'm in the potential with the shamanism and making that work.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to go back because you said something that for a lot of people is a challenge to get over. How did you transition and deal with your Christianity background, now transitioning to magic?
Um, it was really hard. It was hard, but it was not at the same time,
Mm.
because so a little bit more background on this. Like my dad ran a gospel band for
Oh,
like,
so you a gospel
oh yeah,
band? Oh,
like,
so you really was in deep.
I was in. We did 150 shows a year for 12 years. So
Okay.
so I was, you couldn't, to this day you still can't. Nobody can argue the Bible. I know the Bible.
Uh-huh.
I know it inside out,
Mm-hmm.
but I understand it differently now. So
Mm.
that transition was, I would say, when I look back at it, it was already happening,
Mm.
because even when we did shows, like people come up to me, want to talk to you, they're inspired, all that sort of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and I had this thing about me that eventually my mom kind of found out, and she basically kind of shut that down.
Hmm.
But I would talk to people, and within 5 minutes, I told them the whole life story, and that was it.
Mm.
It never failed. Like I always had the ability to perceptively, um, soul search or soul look at, like, if the second I locked eyes with them, I saw everything about them. It was just like how you and I see each other right now. This is exactly how I saw it.
Mm.
And I think my mom, because both my parents, my dad's passed on now, but like both my parents, they come from very strong, um, Afrocentric backgrounds. Right? Like my dad's mom, in the village, if you wanted something fixed, everybody
Mm-hmm.
knew, go
Go
to
to your dad.
go to grandma.
She'll fix you. Take care
Right?
of you.
But
Yeah.
she was the one who was always in church playing the piano the whole 9 yards. But like, you know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
everybody knew, if you have a problem, you go see grandma. Grandma shut it down.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I never really understood those things until I became much older. And that was a huge contention in my transition, because when I found out that those stories were real,
Mm.
it really pissed me off with the rest of my aunts and uncles, because I mean, I don't know if you have that kind of experience, but in black families, there's some black families that nobody talks about anything. Nobody
Yes.
passes on
Mm-hmm.
anything at all. So when I found that out, I was livid. I was absolutely livid, because how could you let us, like second, third generations, go on in toxicity
Mm.
without knowing that we came from power? Do you understand what I mean? So
Power.
that Right. So that,
Legacy.
oh man, that was
Legacy. Yeah.
right. So that was a huge contentious issue that I had to deal with. It was an emotional roller coaster that I personally had to, because I can't. I mean, of course, black. You can't go talk to anybody because they're just going to argue you down, right? And nothing will get done. Nobody. So nothing ever gets dealt with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because everybody keeps their secrets and not realizing that is by far the worst detrimental thing you
Mm.
can do. So that was one of the big things that I had to emotionally get through. That would, one, it would never be solved,
Mm.
and that's why I need to move out of that. I need to move away from that. Like even to this day, I still don't. I don't have a lot of conversations with them simply because I know it's not going to go anywhere.
Mm.
So I had to let that go. Like I
Yeah.
had to physically let that go in order for me to make any kind of progress. I don't hate them, but at the same time, I know I can't be with them
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
unless they get to that point where they can suss that out
Awaken.
within them. Yeah, they got to suss that out within themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and then be able to communicate at the same
Yes.
level. Yeah.
Well, that's definitely one of those challenges. As we talk about using language, as you start to ascend and you start to embrace your spiritual aspect of it, your magic, and you start being more empowered,
Mm-hmm.
it does become challenging for those that there is no judgment, but decide to stay at a certain level, decide not to have that conversation.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
like, okay, you know, but there's no sense of me bringing in tension and conflict and, as you using the word like toxicity into my life because we're not going to be able to agree.
No,
We're,
no, not
we're,
at
we're
all.
looking at two different perspectives in that regard.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, so it definitely, because the next card that came out was
Oh
adventure.
boy.
It's still in this whole green thing. And so yeah, so that was, I think, part of your adventure, part of your life story. So how do you use, because this is the other thing, you went then from spirituality as to, okay, this one thing I just do it at home, with the family or friends, and they just know, come to the Shaman Garland,
Yeah.
in the city, and he'll be able to, help you out with this area.
Yeah.
Tell me about that jump that you transitioned, that you made when you decided, okay, now this is going to be my business.
It was. It started out with wanting to embrace more,
Hmm.
because one of the things that kind of held me back when I was in Trinidad is I didn't have access to a lot of materials. Because I mean, we're talking, you know, we're talking 90s, so
Hmm.
there's not a lot of businesses that would have been like, it was by major synchronicity that I found that book, because there were
Right.
only two books in the store. One, and the other one was about Golden Dawn, which back
Hmm.
in the 90s, the Golden Dawn, they were getting pretty big, right? So
Right.
those were the only two books. And when I looked at the Golden Dawn, it was way too, like, it overwhelmed me just like flipping through the book. So that's why I ended up taking the other one.
The
Um,
beginners, yeah.
yeah, exactly, right. So
Like, I'm not ready at that level.
no,
Yeah,
I
yet.
wasn't. I wasn't ready. They started. I saw spirits and sigils, and shit. I was like, no, no,
No,
not
not
happening
ready. Yeah,
today.
this is not. Yes. Hmm.
So the transition, um, well, it was. I would say it was a growth pattern, because when I immigrated to Canada, that was my first order business. Like when I got
Mm.
here, I was staying at my because she was still alive at that time. I was staying at my grandma's place, in the basement, and I went out and I started buying books. Like
Mm.
whatever money I had, I went out and started buying books like ASAP, like right away. So I had a um, significantly better opportunity to access more materials,
Hmm.
and I think within about 2 years, I had spent maybe about $5,000 worth on books.
Okay.
And that's when I discovered one of the hardest truths in this field is that there's a lot of regurgitation.
Mm.
Right? A lot of books are written up to a certain point, and they go no further. And again, let's just say I have this thing of I don't like bullies and I don't, don't like being held back.
Yes.
That is a big part of my Gemini nature. It's like, don't show me something and then tell me, nah, I can't tell you more.
Right. You got to get the next book.
You are asking for a war zone, like straight war zone. So
Uh-huh.
that was my thing. Like after that, I stopped buying books, and
Mm.
the biggest reason I stopped buying books because I came up, like I did like deep research. I'm talking like, you know, Facebook wasn't around then
Mm-hmm.
when I was doing that level of deep internet research, and I came across this guy that spoke on radionics, and
Mm-hmm.
his entire website um, started talking about deeper magic and talking about magic squares, and I was like, wow, this guy has something going on. And in there, he
Yes.
mentioned a series of books written by a Hermetic author. And the second that I bought that first book, the 10 chapters in that book far exceeded the $5,000 worth of books that I bought in 2 years.
Mm.
And so that was where I began to understand more of,
Mm-hmm.
okay, this is far deeper than I anticipated. And it also led me to make sense of the blinds that, and it, like, I mean, for your audience, like if y'all don't know, like a lot of spiritual books are written with blinds. They call them blinds. In other
Mm.
words, they'll take you 90% of the way, but the way in which the material, the content is written, you don't even know that there's something missing unless you go deep dive and you actually start breaking it down to see if it makes logical sense. And
Mm.
for me, I'm very practical. So if something, I follow like true logics.
Mm-hmm.
If I try something once and it works, that's great. But I follow the STEM procedure. So I'm going to repeat it. And if it doesn't work repeatedly, then it's not true. And that's how I've been able to test it. So even like when I tell my clients, I'll say, if you hear me talk about it, bet your ass I've done it. Like
Uh-huh.
I've personally been on that horse.
Right. Right.
So, so that's how that transition was. That it was something that, and I've always, it's strange enough. Like as far as back as I could remember, I've always had that where
Mm-hmm.
I'll test something. I don't care how many times I get knocked down, but I will test it until I can prove it for myself, because that was one of the big reveals I've had within the last, I'd say, about 10 years. Um, One of the reasons why spirituality seems quite secretive, not from like people not telling, but from the material itself, is because in the way that I state is that in this matrix, you have
Mm-hmm.
to have a subjective experience or else it's not truth.
Hmm.
For you to really understand the way that the universe works, you have to invest in it. And the only way to invest in it is to do it. You
Yep.
know, I mean, another thing I usually tell my clients: if you really want to break this down simple, and this is why I find it like kind of hilarious that that tree card came up, because it's the number one thing I tell my clients. If you really want to break this down, trees grow. We as human
There
beings are the only ones that just kind of fuss around. Oh man, what are we gonna do today?
you go.
No, trees don't wake up to
Yes.
say that. They get up, they grow. You know,
Yes.
they that's
Yes.
and they are very persistent about it.
Mm-hmm.
And any log will tell you, like, you can pour potassium down a trunk. 2 years later, you're gonna see shrubs around the same spot, the same tree.
They're around the same. Yes. Yes.
It learned from the last lesson, is in now it's gonna grow stronger. Like, you know what I mean? So
Well, it's interesting because, like I said, you sharing your story and the perspective, and as I was shuffling, I was like, what would be? this message for those that are, watching this and
Hmm.
interacting and tapping into the energy. And as you say, as we started, back here, and then with this card, it's one person.
Hmm.
And then we talked about the empowered, and we talked about the whole adventure. And then the next card that came out is when we talk about the decks is like the Five of Wands.
Oh
But
wow.
again, it's another man by himself.
Yeah.
Now, and I was like, well, what would be the message? What did Garland, do? And this is what it says on the bottom of the card. It says, conflicts with others caused by opposing opinions, walk away from the drama. Unless the situation is really worth your time, then stand up, standing people for yourself. Very ambitious people.
Yeah.
So it's like it summed up your whole
It does.
conversation,
It
and
does.
like going into to look at yourself, deal with yourself, whatever your inner conflict drama is, dealing with that, but take the time to reflect and go out on your own, have the peace. And as we wrap up, I said, okay, we come from the Christian background. So the other thing that I had, of course, didn't know, but Bible verses for men deck, right? So it was like,
Right.
okay, so what is this encouraging word for my shaman friend here? And
Hmm.
it says, may our Lord Jesus Christ Himself and God our Father, who loved us all and by His grace gave us eternal comfort and wonderful hope, comfort you and strengthen you in every good thing you do and say. 2 Thessalonians 2:16-17.
That's beautiful.
Awesome.
That is beautiful.
Well, thank you so much for connecting with me today. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for
Absolutely.
those that have come and joined us. We also had Marcello to come in, Team Live.
Yes.
Aloha from the ATL. Thank you so much. And thank you for all the others that connected with us, Diana, Melaine. It's been a pleasure. And for those that will watch this on the replay, may this meet you right where you are and hopefully encourage all to live smart and ascend to new levels of success. And until we meet again next week, this has been an all intuitive conversation.